You're listening to Off to Market with Scott Farley and Hamish Chadwick.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Hamish.
Today we're going to talk about using professionals. Cost versus reward. Obviously, professionals cost money. Is it worth the money? I guess that's what we're coming into.
Well, it's the perception of value, isn't it? So what do you reckon, Scott? What's our value?
The thing is, we are both consultants, and it's a little bit, I guess, a little bit difficult to speak about your own profession. But I see it. I'm a profession, but I develop my own products as well, and I employ other people to do work for me, and I see the benefits. I'm good at what I do. Hamish is good at what he does. I can't do naming, I can't do market message and all the rest of it, where Hamish does. He does that for me. If Hamish had a product to develop, it'd be silly for him to go and try and develop it himself without all the years and years of expertise that go into that sort of thing. So professionals, they've been around in the industry for a long time. They're focused on one thing and they're very good at it generally. Obviously you've got to look around and make sure you get good service providers. I've certainly had situations with even medical professionals who just don't get their own industry, so you just got to make sure you find the right people. But once you have a good network around you, and quite often a good professional will also have a good network of people around him. I know when I have a good service provider, I hold on to them with both hands and never let go. When they retire, there's a massive gap to fill, and I find it very difficult. I don't ever refer anyone to anyone I haven't tested and used myself. So I'd just like to go through an example about industrial. My profession is industrial design, and for example, when I do a project, I generally pay for myself very quickly. So the reason for that is, for an example, if I look at a product, I'm very concerned with making the product as suitable to the market as possible, and that can relate to the cost of it. Everything. Your cost, your profits and your purchase. So if you can make things cheaper and more efficient, you're well ahead of the competition. So making things refined and perfect for the industry and perfect for the process is really, really important, and there's probably no one better to do that than a professional industrial designer, because they've got all these hats they understand, like ergonomics, safety, assembly, shipping, product refinement, all these aspects that can really make the product cheaper to manufacture, cheaper to assemble, less components means less cost in logistics and shipping and buying a product. So quite quickly I can pay for myself by just refining a product and making it as simple as possible. You can make a product in two ways. You can make it with sliding, if you have an injection molding tool and you have lots of complexity in that component, the tooling can be twice the price. If you can use smart design to refine that thing and get rid of the complexity, you can reduce the cost of the tooling by easily what I'd charge my consulting fees at. If you just take one component out and that component costs $1, when you first make your first order for 10,000 parts, there's 10 grand you saved. And generally I'll take 4. I've taken, I think the best one was 26 components down to 4. It saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in tooling. And I think the job was 20 grand. So you can definitely pay for yourself. The other thing is we have R&D tax rebates, which industrial designers, are sort of rubber stamped with, because they're all about R&D. So you generally get about 47% back from an R&D tax rebate, and all of our fees are claimable up to prototyping, anything to do with research and development, testing and experimentation. So if you put 20 grand into that project that we were speaking about before, we took one component out of it, you've saved 20 grand in tooling and components, and you've got 8 grand back from the tax rebate from the government. You're $8,000 ahead of where you were before you met me. So there's certainly, and in the end you get a really, really appropriate market ready product. So a bit of self-spruiking there, I guess, but it's not necessarily just me. I see it with Hamish, like my sinker product. I initially went out and did my marketing myself, and I called it the snap-on sinkers. Yeah, that's cool, that's what it does, it snaps onto the line. Everyone perceived that product as a locked sinker, and it's a running ball sinker, which is generally what you'd use that product for. So I just missed the mark. Everyone who walked past that sinker didn't get it. So we've now changed that through Hamish's input to a quick change sinker, not the snap-on sinker, and it's changed the entire feel of that product when the market looks at it. So there's just certain things you know, and there's certain things you don't know. And you know, the amount of hats that I put on, I know in my industry, in order to get a product suitable to the market, you know, there's probably 20 different hats I put on to make sure the product's going to be suitable for to be market ready.
No,
I'm sure you're the same when you do all your products, all your stuff as well.
Oh well, I mean, it's just fascinating to listen to talk about the actual tangible cost savings and money that you get back because of the rebates with tax and things like that. I mean, that's it's not just about self-spruiking there, Scott. I mean, that's very important for entrepreneurs to realise that. I mean, yes, you have to put a lot of money in, but that doesn't mean to say it just goes into a hole. I mean, it is a true investment, and you get a lot of that back. I mean, that's incredible. But I think what I'd like to add to this conversation is, in terms of looking at the value of using service providers, is first of all, the term service provider I'm not too fond of, because really what you need to have with any relationship with a client, or what I like to have, is you have to work with the client as a peer. If you're not a peer, all you are is just a functionary that is there to provide a job which they want done. Now, if you come to Scott or I, the value that you get, obviously there's a fee involved, but it's the pushback. It is third-party perspective. I mean, we have come across so many different products in our working life that we can perhaps, more often than not, provide advice on a number of different levels, or ideas from a number of different levels. It's not just you come to us and say, I want a product designed. It's, well, hey, you know, how about we look at this in terms of the marketing approach, or what about you, as we've spoken about last week, the brand culture. I mean, these are all things that we take into consideration. I mean, or, you know, Scott was talking about videography before. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily equate videography to a product designer, because that seems out of Scott's box. But if you're working with good service providers, the third-party perspective is absolutely invaluable. It's their experience that comes along with the actual job that you've tasked them to do, and that's where you've got to work with peers, not just service providers. Because if it's just a service provider and they sit there and say yes to everything you want because all they want is your fee, well, then the outcome to that may not necessarily be what you require. I always like to say to clients when we start, especially things like naming projects, is you're going to get some argument from me, and you're going to get some pushback, because there's going to be some things where I like a concept, and because of your world experience as opposed to my world experience, you're going to look at something in a... I mean, we're talking about some names before. Scott and I were talking about some names, and Scott immediately looked at one of the names I had come up with and said, oh, that's really funny, we couldn't have that because it reminds me of X. I won't say what that is, but I just thought, wow. Well, it was rude, yeah. But I thought, wow, I actually didn't think of that, you know, and I'm always on the lookout for connotations which may be bad. So my job there as a service provider, or a peer to you, because you're the client in this case, is to say, well, hey, yeah, let's argue that out. I'm not going to sit there and go, just put a line through it. I'll argue the hell out of that concept to push it as far as we can. You know, I'm not going to be a wallflower and
that's
say...
your job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your job as far as I'm concerned. And I've had very heated discussions with people because I know they're taking the wrong direction.
Look at the holes in the wall.
I'll try.
I'm joking.
try and guide them. I'm very passionate about it. I want them to succeed, and I will try and guide them. I mean, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. It's their project in the end, but I'll be very passionate about trying to drive them in the right direction. Yeah,
and that's why I think really the message I want to get across here is I would be suspicious if you don't get pushback even from the first meeting. If someone comes to me and we'll discuss a brief, if we're talking about naming, I will listen very carefully to the client about what it is they're trying to achieve. And obviously, you know, they're very knowledgeable, very close to the product, very close to the concept. My job is to provide a name for that product which is going to work for them in the market. However, often what happens is the disconnect is between, you know, they want a name that is going to sell 1,000 different unique aspects of this product, but really you can't do that. I mean, you can't have a name that's 50 syllables, really. So I've got to sit there and say, well, hey, one of the biggest things I've got to sell is, well, let's look at that name or that word in context with where it's going to sit. Yes, you're looking at it on a piece of A4 paper, but what about the supporting marketing material? And often that gets them because they think, oh yeah, okay. I mean, it's not their fault. I mean, that's what I'm here for. But that's the value, you see. I'm not just going to sit there and say, oh, okay, you don't like that one, and then just keep going back to the drawing board. It's about saying, well, hey, let's look at this in context. Do we need to actually superimpose it on the product? That's part of the process as well. Or coming up with maybe a very quick website which shows the name in its environment with a photograph of the product in like a mocked up e-commerce system. And that's when you start to look at the name in context. And that's what our job is to say, well, hey, let's just not look at something in isolation, just go away and think about it. So I'd always say be suspicious of people that don't give you any pushback, because they're not worth much if they're not, because there's no argument they're providing to you. They're not making you think. I've got to make clients think because it's for their own benefit, because they'll make more money out of it if they get it right the first time. You can't, because I've often had people say, oh, I'll come back to you because, we're working with someone or a firm and they did everything we said, so we like that. And of course you like that, because you're going to them with a problem and you know exactly how you want to solve it. But unfortunately, our job is to say, actually, a lot of that's great, but what about this? Or what about that perspective? Or what about these other products that are sitting right, left or right of it? What about price point? How is that being reflected? So there's a whole gamut of issues that you come to a service provider for that isn't necessarily taken in consideration. It's a bit like working with a graphic designer. Now, a good graphic designer won't just say, okay, you need a logo and you want it blue. They'll say, well, actually, if we're looking at, say, a competitive colour wheel, there's 5 out of 7 products already on the market are blue. We should really, if you're trying to push this as a unique new product, then we should maybe move away from blue or look at shape in consideration with how you use blue. So if I just follow you and say, well, this is what you want, that's great. I mean, I've actually ticked the box and you're happy because I've done what I've been asked and you've got what you think you wanted, but it's not necessarily going to be good for you in the long run. So again, coming back to that value equation, you've got to, when you go and see a service provider and seek out their services, just listen for that pushback. Listen to what other ideas. And it's not like we're going to sit there and argue with you because it's for the sake of the argument, or we want to make ourselves look as if we're better than you. It's not about that at all. It's just simply to push a concept so far that you've exhausted every opportunity to make the right decisions.
Yep. It's a lot of risk mitigation. The other thing is efficiencies. People come to me and they've spent 6 years pondering an idea and getting to a prototype stage. That's 6 years of lost opportunity. The opportunity cost of that product, it might be making $1 million a year, is $6 million they've lost. So, generally someone comes through the door, obviously a professional can turn these things around very quickly and give you a really good result that the market's going to want. So you're going to sell more of them, you're going to be more refined, it's going to be cheaper. So many things are going to flow much easier. Opportunity costs are one of the things that a lot of people don't really take into consideration.
No, it's not. And if I can add too, which is a bit separate to this, but looking at our own sales processes. I mean, I had an interesting case last year where I was helping someone with a project, and I knew they were a little bit difficult in terms of selling my services and my fee, and I knew I could do a good job, and he knew I could do a good job, and it got to a point where it really, the focus for him was just the price. So I'd given him a proposal, and it was reasonable. I mean, it was reasonable because he went ahead in the end, but he was trying to beat me down on price. And this is where, as a service provider, a technique that I've only used it a couple of times. It was quite funny though. He was really just trying to beat me down on price, and because at that point he was looking at me not as a peer, but just as a simple service provider, what I did is reached across the table and said, look, you know what, it sounds as though there's not much value in this project and doing it, so what I'm going to do is say, let's not worry about it at all, and we'll just part as friends and leave it at that. I got the job. Now, I'm not being funny with telling, I'm not trying to prove it. The only point I'm trying to make with that is you've got to make sure that you're then, because I was seen as a peer after that, because I was saying, look, I'm prepared to walk away. I'm not just here to take every job that comes at me under the sun and do it for less just because someone's trying to beat me down. It's about saying, well, no, you've got to establish yourself on a level playing field with the client. Otherwise, you really don't have a good working relationship moving forward.
Well, you and I have been doing this for long enough. We know how much energy and time and effort is involved in all these the creative projects. It's always difficult. And, you know what what your bottom line is. You know what you're going to put. We don't,
So really,
neither of us, are gougers. We don't overcharge. We just know what's involved. You don't want a good job out of me, it's going to cost you this much. If you want a rubbish job, go down the road.
Yeah, so I think really to bring it back to entrepreneurs and inventors, that story I've just told is, if you're looking to work with an investor, or you really need an investor, is perhaps you've got a negotiation where they're trying to maybe get 80% of your company in exchange for the cash they give you, and you're not happy with that at all because you can see where it's going to go. They're the sort of situations where you have to, that's another area where you have to establish a peer relationship with them and say, well, hey, yes, you need me, but I need you. So there's specific techniques you can use there, which is more psychological than anything, but it still counts. So that little story still applies to entrepreneurs that are talking to investors.
Yeah. Look, I've seen it before where people go away and do their own thing, come back, and they've just simply wasted a lot more time and a lot more money. I've done it myself with my marketing, with the thinkers. I tried it myself, went round and round in circles, just cost me lots of sales. And I got Hamish involved, and then realised my mistake. And it's not like it's silly to try and save the money. We're just trying to tell you got to be a bit sensible about whether it's worth the opportunity losses and all the extended times that come around with trying to do it yourself, trying ways to do things, and then coming back and you've spent money doing it anyway. You're pretty much spending the same sort of money, and you're getting a worse result.
Interesting stuff. A lot to take on board there. We'll continue this next week.
See ya.
You've been listening to Off to Market with Scott Farley and Hamish Chadwick.